Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Global History. I am your host, Langella Sensei. So, guys, welcome. I am just going to be here reviewing yesterday's lesson and have it in video form. So, just in case someone misses something or needs kind of rehash of some information, they always have it available for them. Just in case you're joining us for the first time, we're covering Chapter 1, really. It's going to be focused on prehistory and the Paleolithic era. So last time we were here, we talked really about the human origins and really understanding how scientists actually understand or really find out about history before there was any written down history, which is known as prehistory, right? Prehistory is typically the time period in where the only thing we know about it or that they were different types of subhumans and they had cultures based on the different artifacts that were left behind. And we find this out by using different types of social sciences. Basically, archaeologists find out artifacts, anthropologists study culture, paleontologists study fossils, right? And based on their findings, we are able to know a lot of information about generally what groups of people or which types of humans had lived before written history, all right? And that's really important. We also talked about what culture was, what makes up culture. We actually have some tables here to help you out with that. Also learning how somebody can be affected by culture, right? Or really by outside forces can affect their culture is what I really mean to say, all right? And then we finished off with our worksheet. So let's just get started into what today's lesson really is about. All right. So generally what I'd like to do is have you guys analyze this map. All right. And I usually like to have some questions really to guide you in the right direction. So the first question I always think about when we look at a picture like this is, what are some things that you see? And I usually have you guys think about the three things you see. So the first things first you need to always understand when looking at a painting is the person who had created that painting did it purposely for a reason. Okay, they're doing it so that you see all the tiny details and you make a connection to something bigger than that. All right. So, for instance, one of the few things I notice that all the time that all my students always say is that there's fire here, right? Fire is one of the first things they see, and this is really important. They see that there are people here wearing fur clothing. There are people in the back kind of looking that what's beyond in the stars or the trees. This man here has a spear, right? That's really important. You see some snow on these mountains. That's important. You see vegetation. You see grass over here. And then on top of that, you see animals in the background, all right? So these are all different things that you see, but just by looking at this map, and the reality is these types of pictures, or whenever you see a map, picture, document, they should be marked up. All right, because there are a list of things that you can always point out. So the question number 2 I always ask is this image a primary or secondary source? And it is a secondary source, guys. Remember, the biggest thing to help you understand whether something is a primary or secondary source is that secondary sources are made either after the fact or someone that's talking about the event, all right? So this painting was not made during the Paleolithic era, so this is a secondary source. It's someone that's painting a picture of what they deem life was like back then, right? If this was a selfie of someone taking a selfie during that time, that's a primary source, right? If this was a first-hand account of someone's life during that time period, that's a first-hand account. This is a secondary source, okay? The next one, how might this picture be used to determining what life was like during the Paleolithic Age? Well, generally, you can look at some of the details I circled here, like the use of fire, right? That's important. The fact that there are furs, that they're wearing fur outfits, that there are animals, that they're scavenging the area looking for food or looking for best place to hunt, using spears, right? These are all things that are important to understand, especially when looking at what life is like, okay? So when you think about, you can pick a list of things, but probably one of the things I would say is that the fact that these people relied on fire, that they were living in fur coats, animal pelts, and they were really focused on hunting and where the next hunt would be, tells you that they were really reliant on the nature itself, right? What was available to them at the time. And then lastly, in your opinion, what is the most important tool that is used during this era? And I'd probably say fire is, right? Fire is used for warmth. It helped them during this ice age. It allowed them to cook their food. It allowed them to stay away from, dangerous animals because they didn't want to be near the fire. So there's a long list of things you can say. So let's first now talk about the eras, right? We're really going to be focusing on the Paleolithic era. So the Paleolithic era is considered the Old Stone Age, okay? And if you really take a look at the time period in which the Old Stone Age lasts, it's kind of crazy. 2.5 million to 8,000 BC. That's just crazy to really think about, okay? The next major era we're going to focus on, and it's probably going to come at the end of the week, is the Neolithic Age, or also known as the New Stone Age, okay? And that is, if you're really comparing it between time periods, right? The Paleolithic is 2.5 million, and the Neolithic is 8,000 to 3,000 BC. That's such a short period of time compared to the Paleolithic. However, the Neolithic Age is such a monumental shift in how people lived. And we'll get more into that on Thursday. I don't want to ruin the surprise for you, right? We also consider the Paleolithic Age as the Ice Age, so that a lot of people might know it as that as well. But you have to understand that the Paleolithic Age, well, it's called the Ice Age because it's freezing, right? It's so cold that there's no way in which you can, the only type of lifestyle you have is by hunting and gathering. There's no way you can farm. There's no way to farm or even do any sort of agriculture when it's snowing all the time, okay? However, the use of tools was evident. And the reason why this is important, and I kind of highlighted here fire for a reason, because without fire, without some of these tools, they would not be able to survive. Okay, so we look at early advances in technology and how they survived. These people were mainly nomads, and what nomadic means is that they are constantly moving from one place to another, okay? And they're moving based on where the food is located, all right? So they hunted animals, they collected plants, they collected herbs. That's why they're considered hunter-gatherers. There are those hunting and there are those that are gathering, right? And we can kind of point to this by really looking at the Cro-Magnons, which were actually early humans, where they had created really hundreds of different specialized tools for a wide range of activities. So that's really important to understand, is that they were complex in how they lived. They were complex on being able to create weaponry or even tools for them to do the day-to-day things, and these included knives to help them kill game. They even created specific knives to cut open and butcher their game. They even created harpoons to fish, okay? So it tells you that they were pretty, well inept in how to use tools or even making tools for what their situation had called for. But not even just making tools. People usually associate, the Paleolithic Age with the Ice Age as people being cavemen with no artistic or no culture at all, right? And that is wrong. Cave paintings themselves are a way for them to produce a feeling of culture, what they cared about. Think of it this way, right? When someone paints a picture, usually it has something to do with a deep meaning behind it because the person, the artist themselves, has a connection to what their piece or their work is doing. And consider that the same thing when it comes to these cave paintings. They may not be as sophisticated as some art you might see in a museum or a gallery, but they still mean a lot to the people that did make them. So when you look at some of these cave paintings on the left over here, right, some of the things I noticed right away is that they are paintings of animals, right? And you can even see that there are some arrows in here. So clearly, these people cared about hunting. They cared about the resources. They cared about the animals themselves. And there's a bunch of different animals that are included here. And it shows you that they really cared about these animals because they are their resources. And a lot of different tribes, they consider them to be sacred, right? So that's really important. So I mentioned that already, that these cave paintings kind of represent what they believe in or what they deem to be important. They also found that they made jewelry by using seashells, lion's teeth, bear claws, and these were all things that we notice based on archaeologists and other scientists' findings. We actually start to see, as time progresses, as we get further and further along the Paleolithic Age, that we kind of narrow down to kind of close to 2 to 3 human species, right? When you look at the dawn of the earliest Homo sapiens, and really the final two that we know most about are the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons. Okay, those are like the final two, and they're battling it out to see who's going to survive last. Originally, there were a lot more subhuman species, but those ended up dying out millions of years ago, and it really only lasted between the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons, and that's where this fight really starts to really heat up. Okay. Let's talk about the Neanderthals first. The Neanderthals are what we consider the almost like the cavemen, right? Where they, we always deem them to be kind of like dumb or not good at survival. They're just really brutes. But that's not necessarily true. Now, the one thing I could say is that they're more stocky. They have a powerful build. They have slanted brows, very, very well developed muscles. However, it's not the only thing they had, right? They did have a culture. They actually had belief systems, and we know this by finding actually tools and even different religious kind of associated tools that go along with religion, and they even found some flutes that show that they actually have music, and even cave paintings themselves that show that they even cared about art. Okay. All these different things are leading to the fact that, yes, these are Neanderthals. Yes, they are brutes. Yes, they are strong, but they also have culture as well. So let's just watch this quick little video. It goes over Neanderthals, and I think it does a very good job of doing it. So let's take a look at this video.
Neanderthals are often depicted as brutish cavemen, but science shows that our early ancestors were actually quite advanced. Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, are our closest relatives in the human family tree. The species lived from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago and inhabited an area that stretched as far west as Europe's Atlantic coast and as far east as Central Asia. Their habitat reached northward to modern-day Belgium, making them the first humans to survive a cold glacial ecosystem. The North's cold environment may have influenced Neanderthals' physique. Their bodies were relatively short, with males averaging 5 feet 5 inches and females 5 feet 1 inch tall. And they were stocky, with broad chests, bulky torsos, and muscular limbs. These adaptations help Neanderthals generate and retain body heat. Also, their noses were large and had relatively high bridges. This created a nasal chamber that warmed and humidified the cold, dry air they'd breathe in northern regions. Apart from adaptations that helped Neanderthals survive a harsh wintry habitat, the species also developed large brains. They were similar in size to modern humans' brains and were often larger. An increase in brain size may have played a significant role in another type of adaptation: culture. Culture is indicative of an intelligent species, and archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals had a relatively sophisticated culture. They built shelters, made and wore clothing, and created advanced tools. In fact, they were the first human species to make tools out of bone, not just stone. They also created objects that served ornamental purposes. Neanderthals are suspected to be the first humans to carry out the symbolic gesture of burying their dead and adorning gravesites with flowers. Neanderthals may have also created what may be the world's oldest cave art, which was found in Spain. Despite advances in their culture, sometime after 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals mysteriously disappeared. Some scientists believe the Neanderthals were killed or outcompeted by modern humans, or Homo sapiens, who arrived in Europe at around the same time as the Neanderthals' extinction. However, another theory suggests that Neanderthals mated with modern humans and were absorbed into the humans' much larger population. That may explain why most people of European or Asian descent have 1 to 2% Neanderthal genes in their DNA. For more than 150 years, Neanderthals have perplexed anthropologists. The first Neanderthal fossil specimen was discovered in Belgium in 1829 by Philippe Charles Schmerling. However, it wasn't officially classified as Neanderthal until decades later. The first fossil to be recognized as Neanderthal and as an early human or genus Homo fossil was found in 1856 by Quareman in Germany. The new species was named Neanderthalensis after the area where the fossils were found, Neander Valley. Neanderthals' fossils tell us how evolution built them to be sturdy to survive their harsh environment. But their tools, art, and DNA tell us that their resilience also involved innovation, creativity, and social behavior, much like Homo sapiens today.
Good. So it kind of gives you some context of what really the Neanderthal lifestyle was like. I know a lot of people usually that I talk to always think that they're just cavemen and they didn't really have a culture. They didn't really have, a brain behind them. They're really just all brawn and that's it. But that's not true. One of the biggest misconceptions about Neanderthals is that they were too stupid to survive. And that's not true because their brains are actually larger than Homo sapiens are. And they were intelligent. I just think that when you look at the Homo sapien versus the Neanderthal, the Homo sapien ended up surviving longer because the population was larger. And I think they worked better in packs than the Neanderthal did. I think also the endurance between the two of them was different. Okay. So with that being said, I have this quick little video here. I think you guys will like it. It's Homo sapiens versus Neanderthals. Who would win in a fight? And let's take a look about what they think who would win.
A team of scientists and paleoartists has created a more accurate Neanderthal reconstruction based on a nearly complete skeleton discovered in France more than 100 years ago. The Neanderthal man was short but stocky. If a modern man came nose to nose with a Neanderthal, could he take him in a fight? Possibly. A Neanderthal would have a clear power advantage over his Homo sapiens opponent. Many of the Neanderthals archaeologists have recovered had Popeye forearms, possibly the result of a life spent stabbing woolly mammoths and dismantling their carcasses. Neanderthal also had a wider pelvis and lower center of gravity, which would have made him a powerful grappler. That doesn't mean that we would be an easy kill for our extinct relative. Homo sapiens probably has a longer reach and more stamina, and we could deploy these advantages to maximum effect using our superior wits. Neanderthals, on average, were about 4 inches shorter than modern American men, so a guy of above average build would have an excellent chance of defeating a Neanderthal in hand-to-hand combat if he could keep his opponent at arm's length, survive the initial onslaught, and wear him down. Of course, Neanderthals are lightweights compared to some of our other evolutionary neighbors. You would not want to encounter Homo heidelbergensis on a deserted sidewalk. Some specimens were more than 7 feet tall, and they were cannibalistic at times, which means they knew how to fight other archaic humans. Paranthropus boisei would also have been a terror in combat. That creature had powerful jaws, enormous teeth, very well-developed back muscles, and is often described as a gorilla head on a human body.
All right, well, see, that was a pretty good video. I really like adding in both the video of just describing the Neanderthals and then having a little one of those like fun little comparison videos to get you to kind of think a little bit who would win in a fight. And the funny thing is they ended up intermingling, right? The Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons or the early Homo sapiens ended up mingling together to the point where we start to see some of the population is even in a certain percentage of modern day humans. Okay, so what we will do next, once we get out of the PowerPoint here, is we will go right into our worksheet, and I'll bring that up for you guys so you guys can take a look. It would be considered the Contextualize the Paleolithic Age worksheet. So I'll just give you a quick little rundown of how it works, so at least you guys know the directions. Okay, so the first things first, at the very top, it has this nice little excerpt here, talks about a brief little thing about the Paleolithic Age, gives you a nice little timeline. And then the first question I want you guys to answer is based on the prior knowledge. Give a summary of the Paleolithic Age in your own words. So based on something that you learned from class, some of the videos we just watched, and just knowledge that you might have had beforehand, I want you to answer those questions. Answer that one question, really. Okay? Then let's move on to the next part. You're going to be doing a little quick little vocabulary. Make sure you take a look at what the whether it's considered a noun, whether it's considered an adjective, and match that exactly with the definition here. After you do that, you will then answer this question. It's almost it's similar to the last question where it says, what do you think life was like during the Paleolithic Age based on some of the things you learned here? As in, what can you tell based on what the terms are, what life was like, what's really focused on? The next one is going to be, I basically give you a pros and cons list. So this is the pros, and here's the cons. So based on this list I made for you, you're going to answer this question, right? So if you were a hunter-gatherer, right, do you think it's more beneficial to stay as a hunter-gatherer, or do you think it's better to adapt to a different style of living? And you need to explain why. So you should be doing that here, okay? And then the last part is going to be you're looking at these documents and you're going to be answering the questions that go along with them, okay? And that's it. So once you finish with that, that's technically what the class has covered, okay? All right, guys, that's it for me. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always here to help. Langella out.